What would you do if the billionaire CEO of a $70 billion corporation publicly fired an elderly janitor? Only to discover, minutes later, that the quiet old man legally owned 51% of the entire company? Would the old janitor remove the CEO from power? Would he expose a corporate conspiracy hidden for decades? Or would he reveal a secret so shocking that the company's founders had sworn never to speak of it again? Everyone inside Sterling Global believed Samuel Brooks was just another aging janitor. For 23 years, he quietly cleaned offices before sunrise, greeted employees with a smile, and never spoke about his past. Executives barely noticed him. The CEO didn't even know his name. But Samuel carried one old leather briefcase everywhere he went. A briefcase that contained documents powerful enough to change the future of the company overnight. By the end of this story, a billionaire CEO would lose everything he thought he owned. A forgotten promise would finally come to light. And one simple act of disrespect would become the biggest mistake of his entire career. Because behind every powerful CEO, there is always a secret waiting to be revealed. Monday mornings at Sterling Global were always hectic. Employees hurried through the revolving doors carrying laptops, coffee cups, and million-dollar ideas. Luxury cars lined the executive entrance. Security guards greeted investors by name. Yet every morning, before the first executive arrived, one elderly man quietly walked through the building with a mop, a bucket, and an old leather briefcase. His name was Samuel Brooks. He was 70 years old and had worked as a janitor at Sterling Global for 23 years. He never complained. He never missed a day. He greeted everyone with a warm smile, even those who walked past him without a glance. Most employees assumed he was just another elderly man trying to earn enough money to retire. No one knew why he always carried the same worn briefcase. Some joked that it contained his lunch. Others laughed that it held old newspapers. Samuel simply smiled and kept working. That same morning, Sterling Global's new billionaire CEO, Ethan Cole, arrived at headquarters in a convoy of black luxury SUVs. At just 42 years old, Ethan had become famous for increasing profits faster than any CEO in the company's history. Investors admired his bold decisions. The media praised his brilliance. But inside the company, many employees feared his arrogance. To Ethan, every worker was either valuable or replaceable. As he entered the marble lobby, he suddenly stopped. Samuel was carefully mopping the polished floor near the executive elevators. Without looking up, Ethan stepped onto the wet surface. His expensive shoes slipped slightly. The CEO glared at the old janitor. The entire lobby fell silent. No one realized that the next few minutes would trigger the biggest corporate scandal Sterling Global had ever faced. The lobby became so quiet that even the sound of the fountain seemed to disappear. Ethan Cole looked down at his wet shoes, his face burning with anger. He pointed at Samuel Brooks. "Who told you to clean the executive entrance during business hours?" Samuel lowered his mop and answered politely, "I'm sorry, sir. I always finish this section before the morning meeting." Ethan wasn't interested in explanations. In this company, mistakes have consequences. Employees gathered around, pretending to check their phones while secretly watching. Samuel nodded respectfully. "I understand." But Ethan wasn't finished. He wanted to make an example of him. Incompetence has no place at Sterling Global. He turned to the Human Resources Director. "Terminate his employment immediately." A wave of shock spread through the lobby. Several employees exchanged uneasy glances. Samuel had worked there longer than many executives. Yet no one dared to speak. The HR director hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should review." Ethan cut him off. "My decision is final." Samuel quietly placed the mop against the wall. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. Instead, he picked up his old leather briefcase and smiled. "Thank you for the opportunity to serve this company." His calm response confused everyone. As Samuel walked toward the exit, the elderly receptionist suddenly stood up. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "They've just made the same mistake they made 23 years ago." Before anyone could ask what she meant, Samuel stopped at the revolving doors. Without turning around, he spoke just loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I'll leave peacefully." He paused. "But before sunset. The ownership of Sterling Global will be discussed in an emergency board meeting." The doors closed behind him. Inside the lobby, nervous whispers spread from one employee to another. No one understood how a fired janitor could speak with such confidence. And upstairs, an urgent email had just arrived in every board member's inbox. By noon, the atmosphere inside Sterling Global had changed completely. Executives canceled meetings. Investors demanded answers. The company's legal department rushed into the boardroom carrying thick folders marked confidential. Ethan Cole walked in with confidence. "What is so urgent that it couldn't wait until tomorrow?" No one answered. The chairman of the board slowly placed a sealed envelope in front of him. It bore only one handwritten sentence. "Open in the CEO's presence." The chairman broke the seal. Inside were original share certificates, legal agreements, and a handwritten letter dated 23 years earlier. The company's chief legal officer adjusted his glasses. "We've spent the last 2 hours verifying these documents." He looked around the room. "They're authentic." Ethan frowned. "What documents?" The lawyer slid one certificate across the table. It showed the ownership structure of Sterling Global from the year the company nearly went bankrupt. Ethan's eyes narrowed. There, in bold print, was a name he recognized. Samuel Brooks. Beside it was a number that made his heart stop. 51% ownership. The room fell silent. "That's impossible," Ethan whispered. "It isn't," the chairman replied quietly. He opened the handwritten letter. It states that when Sterling Global faced collapse 23 years ago, Samuel Brooks secretly invested everything he owned to save the company. In return, the founders transferred majority ownership to him under a confidential agreement. Ethan stared at the papers in disbelief. "If this is true..." The lawyer nodded. "It means the man you fired this morning isn't just a former janitor." He paused. "He is legally the majority owner of Sterling Global." Before anyone could speak again, the boardroom doors opened. Samuel Brooks walked in carrying the same old leather briefcase. This time, every executive, including the Billionaire CEO, rose to their feet. The boardroom remained silent as Samuel Brooks calmly entered. For the first time in 23 years, he wasn't wearing a janitor's gloves. He placed his old leather briefcase on the table and looked around the room. "I never wanted this meeting," he said softly. "I only wanted to finish my work in peace." No one interrupted him. Ethan Cole swallowed hard. If you owned the company, why spend 23 years cleaning its floors? Samuel opened the briefcase and removed a faded photograph. It showed 3 young men standing beside a tiny warehouse, the original headquarters of Sterling Global. One of them was Samuel. The other 2 were the company's founders. 40 years ago, Samuel began, "We built this company together." He smiled at the old photo. "When the business collapsed, the banks refused to help us. Investors walked away. Everyone believed Sterling Global was finished." He paused. "I sold my home, my land, and every investment I had to save the company." The room was completely still. "The founders begged me to become CEO." Samuel shook his head. "But I refused." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because I believed leadership should be earned, not inherited." Samuel explained that instead of taking control, he accepted majority ownership and chose to work quietly inside the company. "I wanted to see whether future leaders would value people or only profit." Several board members lowered their heads. "For 23 years, Samuel continued, I watched this company grow." His eyes settled on Ethan. "And this morning, I received my answer." Ethan couldn't meet his gaze. Samuel closed the briefcase. "I didn't come here to destroy Sterling Global." He paused. I came to decide whether it still deserves to exist under its current leadership. The room froze. The fate of a $70 billion empire now rested in the hands of the man everyone had called the janitor. Mid-story CTA. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs for more unforgettable stories about billionaire CEOs, hidden fortunes, boardroom betrayals, corporate scandals, shocking business secrets, and powerful life lessons. Because the biggest secret of this story is still about to be revealed. No one spoke. The silence inside the boardroom felt heavier than any courtroom verdict. Samuel Brooks slowly looked around the table before speaking again. I have one question for every person in this room. The executives listened carefully. How many of you knew me by name before this morning? No hands went up. Several directors looked down in embarrassment. Samuel smiled sadly. For 23 years, I greeted you every morning. I held doors open. I cleaned your offices after midnight. I watched promotions, retirements, celebrations, and funerals. He paused. But to most of you, I was invisible. His words struck the room harder than any accusation. Then Samuel turned to Ethan. You didn't fire me because I made a mistake. You fired me because you believed someone in my position didn't matter. Ethan lowered his eyes. For the first time since becoming CEO, he had no defense. Samuel opened his briefcase once more and placed a thin blue folder on the table. Inside was a signed document. The chairman's face turned pale as he read the first page. It authorizes the majority shareholder to remove the CEO immediately. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Ethan looked at Samuel. If you sign it, my career is over. Samuel nodded. Yes. He picked up the pen. Every executive held their breath. The future of Sterling Global depended on the next few seconds. Samuel uncapped the pen, placed its tip on the signature line, and then stopped. I'll make my decision, he said quietly, after I hear one thing from you. Ethan looked up. What is it? Samuel's eyes never left his. The truth. Ethan Cole slowly rose from his chair. The confident billionaire who had once dominated every board meeting was gone. For the first time, he spoke without pride. When I became CEO, he began, I promised the board I would make Sterling Global the most profitable company in the industry. He paused. And I did. Several directors nodded. Our profits doubled. Our market value reached record highs. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing people. The room remained silent. I started judging employees by their titles instead of their character. He looked directly at Samuel. This morning, I didn't fire a janitor. I fired a man I never took the time to know. His voice trembled. And that's my greatest failure. Samuel studied his face for a long moment. Then he turned to the board. Do you believe him? One by one, the directors nodded. Not because Ethan had been perfect, but because, for the first time, he had chosen honesty over excuses. Samuel slowly closed the blue folder without signing it. A wave of relief swept across the room. Ethan looked stunned. You're not removing me? Samuel smiled gently. I could. He paused. But replacing one CEO doesn't change a company's culture. What changes it? Is a leader willing to change himself? Samuel stood and walked toward the window overlooking thousands of employees below. Starting today, he said, every employee, from the receptionist to the newest intern, will be treated with the same respect as the board. He turned back toward Ethan. You still have your position. The room relaxed. But understand this. If I ever see arrogance replace integrity again. Samuel picked up the unsigned removal document. Next time, I won't hesitate to sign it. Ethan nodded silently. He knew he hadn't been given a victory. He had been given one final chance. The weeks that followed marked the beginning of a new Sterling Global. Employees noticed the changes almost immediately. There were no grand speeches. No expensive advertising campaigns. Only action. Every Monday morning, Ethan arrived before sunrise, not to inspect the executives, but to greet the employees who kept the company running. He learned the names of the security guards. He thanked the cleaners. He ate lunch with interns, receptionists, and maintenance staff. At first, people thought it was only for publicity. But weeks turned into months, and Ethan never stopped. He introduced a new company policy called Every Voice Matters. Any employee, regardless of position, could submit ideas directly to senior leadership. Some of the company's most successful innovations came from people who had never been invited into a boardroom. Meanwhile, Samuel Brooks quietly returned to work. Not as a janitor, but as chairman emeritus and mentor to young leaders. He refused a luxurious office. Instead, he chose a modest workspace overlooking the employee cafeteria. When asked why, he smiled. The heart of a company isn't in the boardroom. It's where ordinary people do extraordinary work. One afternoon, Ethan walked past the storage room where Samuel had once kept his mop and bucket. The room was empty now. Only one framed photograph remained on the wall. It showed Samuel cleaning the lobby years earlier. Beneath it was a simple inscription: "Never judge a person's value by their position." Ethan stopped for a long moment. He realized that the greatest lesson of his career had not come from a billionaire investor. It had come from the man everyone had mistaken for a janitor. 1 year later, Sterling Global was making headlines again. This time, it wasn't because of record-breaking profits. It was because it had become one of the most respected companies in the world. Business magazines praised its culture. Employees called it the best place they had ever worked. Investors discovered something remarkable. When people felt respected, innovation flourished. Productivity increased. Profits followed naturally. At the company's annual leadership summit, thousands of employees filled the auditorium. Ethan Cole stepped onto the stage carrying a small wooden plaque. He smiled as Samuel Brooks, now 71, walked to the front amid a standing ovation. 1 year ago, Ethan began, I believed leadership was measured by power. He paused. I was wrong. He turned toward Samuel. The greatest leader in this company was never the man in the corner office. It was the man who quietly served everyone without asking for recognition. The audience erupted into applause. Ethan unveiled a bronze plaque that would stand forever in Sterling Global's headquarters. It read, Samuel Brooks Leadership Hall. Below it were the words, Great leaders don't rise because they are above others, they rise because they lift others. Samuel accepted the honor with tears in his eyes. I never wanted recognition, he said softly. I only wanted this company to remember one simple truth. He looked across the crowd. The person you overlooked today may be the one who saves your future tomorrow. The audience stood once more. Some applauded. Others wiped away tears. And as Ethan looked at the man he had once fired, he understood the greatest secret of powerful CEOs. An empire built on pride can collapse overnight, but one built on humility can inspire generations. If this story inspired you, subscribe to Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs for more unforgettable stories about billionaire CEOs, hidden fortunes, boardroom betrayals, shocking business secrets, and powerful leadership lessons. Every week, we reveal stories where power is tested, secrets are exposed, and character matters more than wealth. Because behind every powerful CEO, there is always a secret waiting to be revealed.